Hello and welcome to our unit number 3, Business Notation Manual. Jürgen already introduced some basic semantic rules in the last unit, and today I would like to explain you how we have to build our own notation manual, something like people doing it in corporate design standards that we use to create our charts, tables, dashboards, and so forth. I would like to come back to the semantic rules and then go into the details of a typical notation manual. When you look at this template chart with 2 layers of variances, absolute and relative, then what Jürgen told you that we say, well, scenarios are used in this way. So we have, let's say, actual is dark and outline for plan. Here you see that the different variances have a clear concept. Absolute variances on this level and above the percentage variances. And then he said, well, number 3 of the basic semantic rules, we have a clear title concept. Here it starts with the company and then the measure and then some information about time and scenarios. And the next one, time is going from left to right. Structure is from top down. In practice, we need to define our own notation manual. It's a manual consisting of 20 to 50 pages, defining all the details for the software developers, for the report developers to apply for the creation of their screens and PowerPoints. So this, of course, is not the reporting at openSAP. Sorry, here would be your company. This is our standard, which can be used and adopted to the needs of different companies. Quite a few large organizations have downloaded this concept and applied it, adopted it to their needs. And it covers these 5 chapters. We have already talked about IBCS with success, and we'll do this in more detail next week. I don't want to touch it now. I would start with a basic layout. We have some basic rules of how to design our content, similar to the corporate design manual. It's about the grid, about typography, about numbers, lines, and so forth. Let me select a few pages out of this chapter. The first one is we have a clear picture of what is the grid we use for, let's say, PowerPoints, for report pages, for screens, how are the margins, and what is the size of the different parts of this page, of these pages. This is the page layout. The next one is about title and message. You already have heard this now. This is a very important part of the concept. We have a title concept. On every slide, on every chart, on every table, the title has the same 3 or maximum 4 rows. And of course, we have a message that shows what we want to tell the audience, when to show the readers, and some details about titles and messages. Of course, typography is an important issue. Which fonts do we use, which font sizes, which is bold and which is regular and italics and so forth. Here is all the details about the typography. Then the currency. Currencies is an important part of many financial reports. We have to talk about how do we write the currencies, how do we abbreviate them, like EUR for euro, and how we do the, let's say, the million euros, how do we abbreviate them? Is it MIO, is it MIL, is it M? We say M is for million, and B is for billion, and K is for kilo or 1,000. Of course, this can be done differently in your companies, but this is our suggestion for the standard. Colors. We have mentioned it before. Colors are so important for our visual perception. We have to be very, very careful in using them. We use red for the negative variances. We use green for the good variances. We use blue for highlighting, and have some other rules for using these different colors, including gray, hatched, and dark. So this is an important part. We have to define it and have to define the use of these colors. Then the semantic notation, as Jürgen started already in the last unit, we have these 5 chapters I'd like to go through briefly. We have to talk about the different measures. That means how do, let's say, stock values look like, how do flow values, how do good or bad values look like, ratios and so forth. Then we come back to the issue of time and structure. Time is always from left to right, and we have different categories on the horizontal axis. For years, they are wider, the category here, compared, let's say, to month here. That allows us to see right away, oh, this is month, or this is weeks, or this is days and years. And of course, we need clear definitions for the abbreviations, the type, how do we say, is it second quarter, is it Q2, and so forth. All these abbreviations is clear. How do we say from to, the time span, for instance, just to give one example, we say is Feb dot or full stop June. That means it is from to. It's not a minus, because a minus means Feb minus June. There are some details. The first day of a month is a full stop before the month, and the last day is a full stop behind, and so forth. Some details about the time series analysis. Now back to the scenarios, because they are so important in our reports today, and we are almost lost if we start using colors for scenario, because then everything will be very colorful. This is typical today. Very often companies use colors to differentiate different scenarios. So we say, no, as you have learned now, solid dark, actual, and outlined is used for budget or plan, and so forth. And the application, as you see it here, would be, this is bars for previous year. This is using the previous year in a table, and this is forecast in a column chart, and this is plan in a line chart. There are symbols using these different types of scenarios. Coming back to the next chapter, which is variances, we have two different types of variances. We have absolute variances here. This is a bar chart, and absolute variances here. The width of the bars have the same width as the basic bars. And this here, these pins you see here, pins are used for relative variances. You see here the basic data, actual and plan and forecast, as a column chart, and you see the variances expressed in those pins. This pin here means it's actual because it's black, compared to an outline axis, which means it's actual compared to budget or plan, which means it's delta plan. Here we're using the head of this pin here is hatched, and so it is forecast compared to here the plan axis, and so forth. Here this axis, the base, is a previous year axis, so it's called a delta, previous year in percent. Okay, this is a short overview to the different variances. Now the last chapter of these 5 chapters in the major semantic parts is indicators. Indicators, we have 3 or 4 basic types. It's differences, That means difference markers showing there's a difference from 1.2 billion or something. Then a trend, a positive trend using a green line and a green arrow, and a red arrow would show a negative trend. Again, a difference marker, and here outliers are represented by these little triangles. So if percentage values are out of focus, very way out, then we use those triangles. Okay, this was chapter 3 of the manual, and now with a brief look about other chapters is charts and tables. In the charts chapter, we will come back to this in more detail in the next unit. We have a chart selection matrix, so we really see which chart has to be used for which application, for which expression, for which message. Then we have different column charts, bar charts, lines, and so forth. Let me go in some details. These column charts have to be defined in detail. The size of the font, the exact position, the exact position where we position this -79, and these vertical separators, and all the details. Here's another separator between now actual and forecast. These details have to be defined in detail, for the programmers on one side and the users in controlling and finding how to use it properly. Of course, it needs tools which follow these rules. Another example of charts is the details for these pins showing relative variances. We talked about this before. And here a typical waterfall showing the quarterly development in a variance, plus and negative variances, red and green. And of course, we also have to look at tables, the different table rows, the table columns, and embedded charts in tables. And here I would only show one example of a typical, let's see, charts, a typical table with a previous year plan and thereof column at the end. There's a clear concept for this, which are the margins, which are the font sizes. The first sum here, this first sum has to be written this way, and the last one looks like this. We have positive and negative signs here, and so forth. All the details have to be defined. We'll come back to the tables in a later unit and show you some more details. Together, I want to say we have this notation manual as a basic idea, as a basic concept of what we have to do when we define the different tools, the different applications, the different PowerPoints, covering these semantic rules and, of course, giving examples. So at the end, when we look at this manual, our charts, like this column chart with the variances, and maybe this line or area chart for headcount development, or this ROA, let's see, the tree chart here, or this table, have the same layout, using the same semantic concept, the same meaning concept, and this is what helps the user, the visitor, the audience to understand our reports and presentations much more quickly. So this was what I wanted to tell you about the need of a notation manual. And in the next unit, we will talk about templates for charts in more detail.